Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 262 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is encouraging others. Our quote of the day comes to us from Renee Swope. Encouraging others not only makes them feel good, it makes me feel good too. Before we jump into today's episode, I would like to quickly remind everybody that we are hosting a live event this Saturday, May 9th. This absolutely free event will feature 9 different incredible speakers to help inspire and encourage us all to get through these tough times together. You can find all the information on our social media platforms, or you can reach out to me at chris@noquitliving.com. We hope to see you Saturday, May 9th. I'm excited to bring you today's episode. I recently met our guest through an introduction from a good friend of mine and former guest, Jeff Forrester. Blake Wright and his brother created their company, 3 of 7 Project, and Blake is all about encouraging others to become the best version of themselves. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Blake, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, brother. It's an honor to be on here and a privilege, so thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Hey, if you ain't making a difference in someone else's life every day, what are you doing with your life, right?
Amen.
That's what we're on earth for.
I could not agree more. So, as you know, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Well, I've got 2 little girls, so I've got 3 girls in the house. So every day is probably a little bit of a no quit story. But you know, to think of a time in particular would probably be the first ultra marathon I did up in the mountains of Virginia. Me and my brother Chad actually ran it together. And if I had to pick one time physically, I would say it was that. That was the first race I'd ever ran, and it had about 12,000 feet of gain, and it had a 12-hour cutoff, elevation gain, 12,000 feet of elevation gain. And I just had a lot of stomach issues through it, and, obviously a lot of lessons to work out, it being my first race. But, we pushed through. I was chasing cutoffs the whole time coming into each aid station. If you don't run ultra marathons or you're not familiar with it, a lot of times they will have hard cutoffs at the aid station. So you're not out there all night and, they're worrying where you're at or the race is closed down and then you're still out on the trail. So we were coming into those with anywhere from maybe 2 or 3 minutes left up to 15, and probably about 15 miles in, my stomach started cramping up real bad because of the food that I was taking in. I hadn't properly prepared what I was going to eat. So I started eating the gels, and the sugar got to me bad, man. And it had me at times. I was just doubled over on the side of the trail, laying in the mud, just wishing it would stop, But luckily I had my brother there with me. And, if it wasn't for him, I'm not going to say I would have quit, but I guarantee you I wouldn't have been able to complete the race in the cutoff time because I would have got cut by the aid station. So a lot of challenges in that, but that was probably the most physically challenging thing I've done where I did consider, the thought crossed my mind, it would sure be a lot easier if I just quit this, but I wasn't going to let my brother down, right? That's a big thing to me when you're going into something hard that you think you might get the idea to quit. I think it's important to have an accountability partner that, that is there to help get you through it. And, I told Chad I was going to do that race and I wasn't going to let him down. He's my big brother. I've looked up to him all my life. So I wasn't going to get out there and not give it everything I had. So that would probably have to be the moment I pick.
You touched on quite a few things that stand out, and accountability partners are something that we talk about all the time. We have a clothing line, and on our stuff, hats, shirts, everything, it's hashtag accountability. So that was really important to me because I myself have a couple accountability partners. You know one of them, Jeff Forrester, fairly well. And it's the same thing that you said in the sense of when you commit to somebody, you tell somebody you're going to do it, you're being accountable to them and they're being accountable to you. So I'm really glad you shared on that. Want to just go back to the first part of what you said. I know, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know what an ultra marathon is, but I just wanted you to just briefly explain the depth of what an ultra marathon is.
Yeah, so most of the ultra marathons are trail events. They're not. I guess there probably are some that don't have much climb or elevation gain or loss, but most of them are out on the trails in the mountains, and technically it's anything over a marathon. So anything over was 26.2 miles. Generally, the kind of entry level is a 50K, and then from there you have a 50 mile and 100 mile and up. Now they got them as far as you want to go. I think you can go run as far as you wanted to in an event. But in general, that's what it is.
How long was this one you're referencing?
That was a 50 mile.
Oh. So if our listeners didn't catch any of that, none of that stood out, just make sure you apply and you fully take in 50 miles. I think there are a lot of people I know that have not run 50 miles in a month or in a couple months. So I think it's pretty interesting. And you also shared, how many, 1,200 or 12,000, would you say?
I think it was about 12,000 feet of elevation gain.
Wow. Yeah, so 12,000 feet. As well as 50 miles. That's unbelievably impressive. I wanted to just ask you if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do today.
Yeah, so I grew up here in the North Georgia mountains. We spent most of our time hunting or fishing or riding four-wheelers, doing stuff outside. We were always out playing in the creeks or doing something in the woods. And as I got older, I went to college and got a bachelor's degree and, kind of did the regular thing. I joined the police department, the local police department, and spent a couple years there and some time on the SWAT team. And it just wasn't paying the bills. And, I love the work. I appreciate everybody that does that kind of stuff. But if I could go back to it, I would love to. But so anyways, I got out of that and I'm currently, my day job is erosion control, and it's nothing really fancy, but it pays the bills and gives me a pretty free schedule. So, and then, we talked earlier, me and my brother have a business called 3 of 7 Project, and we'll hit on that whenever you're ready. But that's really where I find my fulfillment nowadays. When I was policing, I'm a real big encourager and like to make a difference in someone else's life. And I got that fulfillment out of policing, because if you police the right way, you can really make a difference in someone else's life. I mean, you can either go out there and be a prick, or you can do it to really make a difference in someone else's life. And that's the approach I took. So for the longest, that really filled my happy tank. But when I got into construction, I still had other people that I could impact in my workplace, but it was just on a different scale. So really having the project that we do, it's really filled that void in my life to be able to, I guess if you want to call it answer a calling, or, I just feel like that's really what I'm called to do.
I think it's important what you touched on. You spoke about, obviously, the impact you had as a police officer, and there's 2 ways to go. I'm sure there's a couple different ways to go more than that as a police officer. But you also talked about the impact you can have in your day job, and as well as the project you are doing with your brother, Chad, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I think it's really key that you touch on that, because I think a lot of people, and I think some of it goes probably to social media and looking at other people and how many followers or likes they have, or how many comments they get, how many views they get of videos and things. And I think that's not impact. That's not making a positive difference on other people's lives. Now, obviously it can, but that doesn't define whether or not you or me or anybody else is positively impacting someone. So I'm glad you touched on that. We ask a question almost every episode is, how do you define success? And the last 4 times I've asked that question, the podcast episodes have not yet been released. Each of the 4 people define success by fulfillment. So I'm curious for your definition of what success means to you, or how do you personally define success?
This will probably be a little bit different answer than you normally get, but I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. And so to me, success is how close you get to what God has called me to do. So if God has called me to go out here and be an encourager, then the amount of people that I encourage today aligns with my success. So, maybe I get, have a bad day and I don't encourage anybody, then that day I have not been successful. So that's how I measure success personally.
I love it. And I think the reality too is every single day, every person can encourage at least one other person. And I think that goes from the anti-social media perspective, where somebody looks at their post or their story and they say, well, I only had 5 likes, or 10 people, only 10 people looked at my story. That doesn't define whether A, it's a good story, or B, it's a successful post. What does, I feel, is if somebody looked at that, somebody read it, and they were encouraged because of you. So I'm glad you touched on that. I appreciate it.
I think that's so important because, you might go out and you might speak to a crowd of 1,000 people, but you might have only been there to reach one person. And if you reach that one person, then mission successful, right? I mean, that's all you were there to do, and you did it. So I agree with you.
Yeah, that's so cool how you said that. I always talk about in every show is when we release our podcast, my hope is that the guest story connects with at least one person, and whether that person was going to give up, leave a marriage, leave a business, do something else, or just not work hard. If that one person listens to that story and says, you know what, this is going to make me keep going, and I'm not going to quit today, I'm not going to quit tomorrow. And that's what it's all about, impacting that one person.
Yeah, and here's the thing is that is compounded. If you impact one marriage, well, then you have impacted the children in that marriage, and those children are going to remember how their parents dealt with that problem, and you have impacted generations. You've impacted people that you're never even going to meet.
I love that. We talk about it quite often is the compounding of that one person and the positive impact that one person has, and like you said, to possibly a spouse, to a child. But then the reality is, to take it a step further, that kid, he or her, then talks to one of their friends, and then their friends talks to maybe one of their sisters or brothers, and it's really neat. It's neat how you said that. So the question we ask everybody is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
I would have to pick, I guess, encourager. I really enjoy, and that's different than inspire or inspiring, because I don't really, if someone's not already motivated, I mean, I will put some effort into trying to get them going, but I just don't enjoy trying to, like if someone's sitting on the couch and they don't have any interest in going out and running, say, I don't really have a big interest in trying to get them inspired to go do it. But once someone is inspired, I really love to encourage them and to almost guide them down the path that will get them to their goal, and help them to realize that, most of the time they already have what's inside them to achieve that goal, because if they didn't have the desire to do it, it wouldn't be something they should do anyways.
I'm a former high school, AAU, and college basketball coach myself, and it's interesting that you said that, because I've had conversations and I've been on different panels, and I've been to and attended many coaching conferences, and one conference in particular, they were talking very specifically about motivation, and it was very interesting because I was one of the youngest attendees, and the conversation went to a really, really neat place for me, because they were talking about what a coach's quote-unquote role is. And there was a coach in the collegiate level, very successful, that was very specific, and he said that my job is not to motivate my players. And people kind of, were taken back, and he went on to better define it, and probably better than I'm going to do here. But he said, of course a coach should be more motivational than he's not, or she's not. But he said if a player is coming to a practice or to a game and they're kind of in a lull or down, they should not rely on a coach. Say, all right, I'm not feeling it today. Like, jump up, rah, 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 get me going. And again, of course, their coach should be more motivating than non-motivating. But he then went on to use that exact same word. As he said, I believe my job is to be an encourager, and he went on to define it. And he did a really amazing job. But I was completely taken back by it because it was the first time. This is going back probably 10 years now, but it was the first time I'd heard somebody at a really successful level define the difference of motivation versus encouragement versus being an encourager. So I'm glad that you touched on that. You had mentioned the 3 of 7 project, and I wanted to kind of just let you or give you some time to kind of define that and tell our listeners a little about what you and Chad do.
Yeah, so the 3 of 7 project is a company that me and Chad do together, and essentially, our main goal is to provide a resource that will help people become a more complete human being, and we do that through. I'll kind of explain the name because we named it that so that it would be intriguing and people would ask. So the 3 is symbolic of the body, soul, and spirit. Everybody is comprised of those 3 parts to be one person, and the 7 is the number in both the Bible and numerology, and just throughout everything for completion. So the tagline is "Complete Yourself," and that's basically what we do. We have a podcast, we do speaking engagements, we have products, we have a finishing school, which is just a more intimate level, more one-on-one versus broadcasting. To focus on yourself. So we have those different areas, and that's why we exist, to help other people complete themselves and to focus on each one of those areas in order to be the most effective in their lifetime.
That's awesome. And I wanted to just get maybe your perspective of the tagline. You said "Complete Yourself," I think is really cool. Wanted to just get your personal opinion or perspective of what that means to complete yourself.
To me, it is, because so if you have, say, your body and your soul, or say your body's in really good shape, but your spirit's lacking, well, good shape can be many different things, but let's just say, bodybuilder, your body might be in excellent shape and you can go win these bodybuilding contests or powerlifting contests, and you're really good at that. That's great. But if your spirit is not sharpened or in tune, then you're going to be lacking in other areas of your life. And it's going to be more relational, probably if it's your spirit and your soul that's lacking. So you yourself may be in good shape, but everything else may be in a wreck. So, I believe that each one of those has to be sharpened equally in order to be the most effective human that you can be. It's kind of like, I think of it almost as like you sharpening a knife. Each one is kind of wearing down on the other. The knife's wearing down on the stone's wearing down on the edge of the blade. But in the end, they both come out sharper. The edge of the blade sharper, the sharpening stone has been worn down, and in the end, they come out a more complete project than they are when you started.
I love that, and we use the hashtag quite often, iron sharpens iron, and I think it's probably a similar play on that. But I appreciate you touching on that, because I think it's really interesting when you break down different people's businesses and companies and things, because I enjoy personally when people have a interesting name or an interesting theme or a subline or subcategory, and I just think it's really neat. Because I've not heard that. I've read it, and it's very different when you read something from somebody as opposed to when you hear from them as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it, brother. But for us, it's not all about the money or anything. We truly just want to make a difference in people's life. That's the whole reason we started it up. We just thought, what can we do to make the biggest difference in someone else's life, and that's what we felt like we needed to do.
No, you definitely are, and I think it's an amazing project. And want to just jump onto your podcast there for a minute. If you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about the podcast, the show, what they can expect, and where they can find it, because hopefully after today's show they'll jump on and subscribe or download some of the episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on Apple, on the iTunes Store, Google Play, Stitcher, pretty much any one that you want to go to. They're also on our website, 3of7project.com. And if you just Google it, you know it'll come up on any of the platforms. And the goal, what we try to achieve, we try to interview the most complete humans that we can find and pull something out of it that is applicable to their life. You know, if somebody's really good at one aspect or all three, we pull from those and figure out what it is that they do day to day, or what it is that they do differently than someone who is not the most complete person, and give them, the listeners, a resource so that they can apply that to their life.
That's very similar to what we try to do. We try to ask those open-ended questions to help our listeners get different strategies and things. And one of the areas we tend to focus on is the morning routine. So I'm curious, Blake, if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
Yeah, for sure. Like I say, I've got a lot going on. So sometimes I wake up and I hit the ground running. Sometimes my phone's ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's always the same, but it might be a condensed version. But, you know, every morning I get up, I spend time focusing on my spirit, which is, for me, reading the Bible, spending time in prayer. And to me, that sets the tone for the day. That's what I do every morning. Now, it might be opening up my Bible app and reading just a short daily devotional. Maybe I think about it on my drive into work. Or it might be sitting down and spending 20 or 30 minutes or more reading a chapter or a whole book in the Bible. It's always different, but those two parts are always take place every morning. And it definitely, if some mornings I do go without it, you know, there has been times, it's been a while, but I notice the difference if I don't do it. So for me, it works.
You know, I think it's interesting that you started off the way your answer was. You said you always do the same thing, but some days it may be condensed. And I think that's really powerful, and I hope that our listeners understood that, because it's something that we talk about a lot. Is there are only certain times in your life where you can control the controllables. And as of this recording, we're going through the coronavirus, and it's been very challenging for many people. And the reality is, right now where we are, not only in this world but in the country, there are certain things that we have no control over. We don't control when the government's going to open up certain things. We don't control when certain things are going to happen or not happen, whether sporting events, all that stuff. So it goes back to that morning routine, is control the controllable. What can you control? Whether you wake up at 5 or 6, if you don't have quote unquote enough time, then wake up 5 or 10 or 15 minutes earlier. But I loved how you spoke very specifically about the condensed version, because I think that's really important. I have my own morning routine that I swear by, and for me, there are days that I'll have an hour to do it and kind of go through it in a nice fashion where it's slow and I'm going into it. But then there's days when I only have 15 or 20 minutes, or maybe I have to do one of those in the car as opposed to at my house. But it's important about getting through it. And then the other thing you said is that, you know, there's certain days you don't get to do it and it impacts you. And that's the thing I tell people all the time is, if you have a quote unquote bad day where you don't get to do it, instead of dwelling on it and super focusing on it, realize that, okay, you know what, I didn't win this morning in that regard, but tomorrow's a new day and I'll take care of it tomorrow, and I'll go into this day, this afternoon or evening, and I'll do my best.
That's exactly right, man. That's key. You know, nobody's perfect. So there's going to be times where you fall short and where you're not able to do it. But if you recognize it and you adjust, that's where it's important. Now, if you fall into a rut, then you've got some things to work out. It's still not a big deal. You can get back on it, but when you fall off the track slightly, it's easier to jump back on the next day and pick right back up where you left off.
Always. And I think when you miss 1 or 2 days of something, it's much easier that second or third day to get back on, as opposed to if you miss 5 or 7 or 10 days, then all of a sudden you're having that negative streak going the way.
Yep.
So I think we're very similar in some ways as far as our show and kind of how we try to bring out those different things. And one of the things that we find to be extremely powerful are the books you read and the things that you put in your mind. And I was curious if you're reading anything right now, or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, there's obviously the Bible. I said I try to read it every morning, but beyond that, There's a guy by the name of Dr. Miles Monroe, and he is passed away now, but really he's got a lot of really good content, YouTube videos and stuff. But he has a book called The Fatherhood Principle, and it goes into not just fathering children, but fathering other people in your community, fathering your wife, and not in a sense of them being your biological children. He means leading. But that's a really good book. Another one I like is As a Man Thinketh. And that's written by James Allen. That's a really good book. It's a short read, but you can go through it pretty quick. And probably the other one of my other favorites is How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a really good book also.
So was reading or is reading something that you got into yourself? Was it passed on to you? How did you get into that? Because I always like to inquire about that, because for me, growing up, my father always challenged me in a positive way to read an extra 5 minutes a night, not school related. He said it'll help your SATs, it'll help your vocabulary. And again, me being not listening to my father because I was young and cool, I'm like, no. And now I'm a voracious reader, and I kind of wonder, I wonder what would happen if I actually took his advice. So I'm curious if you got into it yourself or someone kind of led you that way.
No, it was really something I'd gotten into myself. One of my real good buddies and really mentors in my life, Paul Wilder, he had recommended Miles Monroe to me, and I didn't think much about him and started listening to his stuff on YouTube and reading his books, and it just really got the train rolling. Now, I don't get time to read other books like that every day, but any leisure time that I have, I like to spend some time reading that, because you can pull from other people, just like the podcast, man. That's why you have this podcast, so people can pull from other people's ways of doing things, and it's the same with a book.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that's the best and the worst part of being a podcast host and having your own show is you spend a lot of time getting guests, recording, editing, doing all those things, and I find that I don't have as much time as I'd like, and I have a lot of very good friends that are in the podcast space as well, and I see some of the things that they release, and I wish I could almost press pause on some things and just listen to all of them, because I know that there are some amazing shows out there just dropping some absolute incredibly value bombs each and every episode, and I wish I could listen to them all. I'm hoping that at some point there'll be like a Cliff Notes version of podcast where you can be like, all right, this show is about boom, boom, boom. Be like, all right, definitely check that one out.
That's right. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Maybe that'll be maybe you and I can jump into a side business. It'll be the Cliff Notes of podcast.
Yeah, you might want to edit that out before someone steals it.
Actually, yeah. See, that's why you'll be a good partner. So I'm curious to this question for you is, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, that was only 8 years ago, Christopher, but I guess I think it would be to slow down, because I have a lot of times I will get busy, I'll call it, where I have a lot of things to do, but I put more emphasis on achieving tasks than I do the eternal things, such as my family and, even focusing on myself. It could be just that, I got to cut the grass, I got to go to the dump, I got to do stuff for work, do stuff for the project. And I guess the advice would be to slow down and when you're making a decision on what task you're going to do, to think about, is it eternal? Is it going to matter when I'm 80 years old that I didn't cut the grass, or that I didn't spend that hour playing with Barbies with my little girl and making a memory with her, or going out and, riding bikes or doing something like that.
That's powerful. And I think we've all probably read those quotes or seen those videos where they interview people and elderly people in nursing homes, and they ask them about regrets and things. And to your point, it's not those comments where they say, what, I really wish that I mowed the lawn, 2 or 3 more times, and I wish I had, spent another 2 or 3 hours at the office. It's the opposite. It's creating that memory. And it's not just, to your point, for a child. It's memories in general. It could be to a husband, to a wife, could be with friends, with family. But I'm glad you touched on that. If I had the ability, Blake, to grant you dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Man, it'd be Jesus Christ, hands down.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had said to me I had to bet all the money in my wallet right now, I would have said that was going to be your answer. Let's take Jesus off the table. He's not available that night. Who would your second one be?
Probably I would probably have to pick Miles Monroe, man. He has helped me a lot in just understanding things and growing in my faith in God, and just throughout life, just listening to him, he's helped me out a lot. So I think it'd be cool to sit down and have a conversation with him. I
will tell you this: I have heard of Miles Monroe, but I have not done any research or anything, and I'm excited now because now you gave me some what I call positive homework. That's I wasn't a big fan of homework in high school and college, but in regards to becoming a better version of myself, I'm a big fan of that type of homework. Yeah, absolutely, man. You got to check him out. He's good. He is motivational. He's a really good speaker. He's got a lot of good stuff out there. That's awesome. So I'm going to switch lanes here, if you're okay with it, what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request we have for you is you just spit out the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick? Pizza. Yes. Favorite smell? Chocolate. Favorite sport? Probably chocolate chip cookies. Favorite sport? Man, I don't watch a lot of sports. If you consider turkey hunting a sport, that's what I'm doing, man. It's turkey season right now. All right, then that's the sport now. Favorite book? Probably by I'm gonna say How to Win Friends and Influence People. All-time favorite movie? Man, I'm about to say probably Rambo. Oh, great! The first Rambo. I like the last one too that came out last year. I'm not gonna lie, Sylvester Stallone's he's just a badass, and I'm a big fan of his. Yeah, I hadn't seen that one, but that first Rambo's hard to beat. Do you have a favorite singer, group, or band? Probably have to pick Hank Williams Jr. And do you have an all-time favorite quote? I don't guess I have an all-time favorite. There's several that I like. I don't guess I got any. I'll put. There's one called. It's kind of long, so I don't remember it exactly, but it kind of goes, "I shall pass this way but once," and it's just talking about making the most of each situation and encounter you have. And if you were stuck in a foxhole and you could only pick one person to have your back, who would it be? I'm pretty sure I know. Chad, man. I knew that was coming. So okay. I have an interesting question for you, and just to get your perspective on. People face adversity all the time, and often find themselves with their back against the wall. And some people just give in pretty quickly and throw in the white flag. Why some others won't give in and don't ever give up. I was curious if you have just kind of your thoughts on the difference between those two people, and if it's something that's you're born with or something that you kind of build and adapt throughout your life. I think that it is something that can be inherent in people. I don't know if it's something you're born with or if it's your raising. I don't. I guess it's hard to say, but I think it is something that can definitely be learned. If you are somebody that quits things a lot, it's something that you can learn how to not quit. Listen to your podcast. You got tons of good guests on here and just all kind of good content. And so I would say spending a lot of time with people that don't quit. You are who you hang around with, right? So to answer your question, I
I guess I don't really have the answer or know the answer. I think that your raising has a lot to do with it, and I think that you can be born with a personality that is more or less apt to quit or not quit. But if it's something that you desire, you can definitely pick it up.
No, I appreciate you touching on that. So for our listeners that want to find out more about 3 of 7 Project as well as a podcast, and also find out more about you, just hoping you would share that with the listeners as well as your social media, so they can follow both yourself and the project and the podcast.
Yeah, so my social media, I'm mainly on Instagram. I am on Facebook, but mostly active on Instagram, and my handle on there is Blake Wright 37. And same goes for 3 of 7 Project. We're on both, mainly more active on Instagram, and it's just 3 of 7 Project, the numbers. And if you want to know more about what's going on with us, we have a website, 3of7project.com. And like I say, all our podcast is on there, our store is on there. So anything you want to know, that's the place to go check it out.
Awesome. And then last question we ask everybody is, wanted to know if you have some parting words you'd like to leave today with our listeners.
Yeah, I would say that quote I shared earlier, I just looked it up here, so I'll read it real quick. But it says, "I shall pass this way but once. Any good that I can do or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." And to me, I think that's just a good reminder that every day you get up, it's only going to happen that way, that one time. So make the most of every situation, whether it's, just an absolutely terrible day. Embrace it and grow out of it and use it for the good of you, and because it's not going to happen again. And so regardless what situation you're in, if you have a big platform or you have a little platform, everybody that you encounter, you have that one moment to really impact them. So make the most of it.
It's great sounding on an excellent podcast. And for our listeners, I would definitely recommend finding out more about not only Blake, but also the 3 of 7 Project, as well as the 3 of 7 podcast. So my man, I truly, truly appreciate it. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, brother. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to episode number 262. Blake is all about encouraging others to become a more complete human being. On today's episode, Blake spoke about making a difference, impacting one person, and the importance of being a true encourager. In his parting words, Blake shared the importance of making the most out of every single day, because it won't ever happen again. I challenge you, no matter where you are or what your day looks like today, no matter what, just go ahead and make the most out of it. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.